computers. Computers? Sperm-puters. I don't know. I was just looking at the computer. You might learn nothing. And I don't know about that. With Jim Jeffries. All right, seamless.
I think that's the first one you ever gave up and explained what you were doing in the middle. I don't know. I'm just looking at the computer.
All right, Kelly's with us, but Kelly's not in the studio because Kelly's had her molars removed.
Wisdom teeth.
Wisdom. They call them 12-year-old molars. Oh, no, 12-year-old molars when they're growing. The wisdom teeth, the other ones. I was telling Kelly that I was born without wisdom teeth.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
He told me he's the most evolved person.
I'm the next step in evolution. This is actually happening with more and more people, but they do an X-ray on your teeth when you're a child and they can tell whether you have them. And I was born with 0 wisdom teeth. People are born with like 1 to 4 of the things, and I had none of them. So
put that on your Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's a little bit fun fact. Fun fact. I was born without wisdom, so I'll never have to have those removed. But my brothers are the uninvolved bastards that they are.
He still has his?
They still had them. Yeah, they had to have them removed and everything. But I was born without them. My mother always complimented me on such the thing. Oh, Jeffrey never had wisdom teeth.
I had mine out when I want to say like 17, 16 or something. I was young.
I think I got mine out at like 15 or something.
Yeah, it wasn't bad back then.
Before that, Forrest had a real silky, smooth speaking voice.
Something happened.
Yeah,
what did you do to me, Doc?
They dug in there. Hey, thanks, Doc. That'll be a lot better. Hey, Ma, I got no wisdom teeth.
How are you doing, Kelly?
My camera's off right now because laughing made me be in a lot of pain.
And how does the camera stop that? Oh, you don't want people seeing you wince.
Yeah, because I'm just like holding my face. I'm putting pressure on my face so that it doesn't.
Is your face all puffed up?
I'll turn my camera on for you.
No, I'm not gonna. Oh, it definitely is.
Oh
no,
my God!
You look the same.
You definitely look better than when you were swollen.
Yeah,
half her face was like puffing out.
Week.
Hey, you look fine.
No, you. I tell you, who always looks like their wisdom teeth have just been taken out. Kanye West. Holy hell, that man looks post wisdom teeth.
He looks post wisdom.
You start new beef. It's gonna be you and Pete on one team.
Yeah. I'll call up Pete. I know Pete Davidson. I'll ring him up and go, I said something that you could say to Kanye. It'd be very funny. I'm going to say he looks post wisdom teeth.
Yeah, that'll be his next album title.
Get it past Kim. See what she says first. I like that the Kardashians are advertising on Hulu. They've got a new show, and their last show was like this. It's going to be so good to get rid of cameras out of our lives. They lasted 6 months.
Jeez.
You got some shows coming up.
Texas, baby. I'm in Sugarland. With the land of sugar.
San Antonio the 25th.
Kicking the bush in Sugarland.
Also San Antonio, the 25th. Sugarland, the 26th.
San Antonio, I'll be, remember the Alamo because I'm right next to that. So if you get to there, you can walk to it.
Have you ever been to Alamo?
I've been in San Antonio. I was in a hotel that I think was called the Alamo or some shit. I was like, I could see it. It was like a 100-meter walk and I didn't go.
It's right there in the middle of the city. Yeah,
I didn't go. I might go this time. So if you want to see me, I'll be at the Alamo.
And then 2 weeks after that, you're in Grand Rapids, Michigan on April 8th.
Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm in Green Bay, or as I like to call it, I'm in, where else am I?
That's April 8th and April 9th, Grand Rapids, Michigan and Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Green Bay, Wisconsin.
And then after that, Canada.
And then Canada, and then off to the sunny Australia. I only seem to go to Australia in the winter, so my son's all excited because it's his summer break, but I'm like, the beaches won't be very good. I don't know what to do in Australia when it's not nice weather. Like, what do you do? Just go to the movies.
I don't know. You're from there. I've never been there in the winter, so that's all.
The last time I was in Australia, I left when I was about 20. So most of my people go, what do you do in Australia? Oh, most of my time, you drink alcohol in a park and finger a trick against a tree. Because that's what you do as a teenager,
Against a tree.
Not against it. She's consented.
I know. Yeah.
The tree hasn't, though.
I just thought you'd be in a more comfortable setting, Like
no, because you can't go out, your parents. Did your mother let you shag in the house?
I didn't. It wasn't like something she said I could do, and I guess it was a car. I was in a car.
Yeah, I did car sex. Everyone did car sex.
Yeah, very comfortable.
Before that, you had to go. Yeah, there was a tennis courts at the end of my street, and that parking lot was always filled with people fucking. And my dad would always walk the dog at that hour, just walk around, have a little perv through the window.
So all those dates are available at jimjeffries.com. And I'll be at Side Splitters in Tampa, April 7th through 9th. You can go to foreshaw.net. I'm also in Sacramento in May. I don't have the date on there. I believe it's May 19th.
And if you haven't signed up for the Patreon yet, join the Patreon and join the fun.
It's building.
Patreon.com/IDCat. And also, I think by the time this episode drops, that our merch store will be live. So that's going to be IDon'tKnowAboutThat.com.
Yeah.
What's on the merch?
We got hats, we got mugs, we got shirts, we got sweatshirts.
I got an idea. So a T-shirt that says "I don't know about that," and then there's just cum stains on the shirt, like because we always do a cum joke.
Well, we can add that after the shirts are printed.
Yeah. Instead of signing autographs,
We can only do 2 shirts a day. Well, I can. Jack can probably.
I'll step in. I've learned your signature.
Yeah, Jack can do about 10 different fucking shirts a day.
I can do one.
Yeah.
I don't produce. I'm the opposite of you. I don't think I produce a lot of cum, so I can do 1 shirt a day.
If you guys buy shirts and you come to Jim's show and you get meet and greets, he will come on your shirt.
Wow, big promise. All right.
Yeah, I might get some money from that. Unlike those April 18th shirts that I've never seen a dime.
Yeah, so subscribe to our Patreon. I think the one that just came out was we had bonus, right? From last week was a bonus Lexi Luna footage. Yeah. And maybe what else was on that one?
She came out to our show in Vegas. Actually,
yeah. That was a fun episode. People are enjoying it. So subscribe to that. Also our IDCat Instagram. And
let's start the podcast.
Now let's some ads.
Yeah, that's look, I see them as part of the podcast.
Yeah.
To all the people who pay for advertising, I appreciate you. Let's do it.
Now let's welcome our guest, Garrett Graff.
Yes.
G'day, Garrett. Now it's time to play.
Yes, though. Yes, though. Yes, though. Yes, though. Judging a book by its cover.
I underestimate how good Jack is at his job.
Yeah.
The one time we got Louise to do it, and
Started it too
Jack
soon.
wouldn't have fucked that up.
Full screen it.
Yeah. Now you got a full screen, you idiot.
Yeah,
Fucking hell,
jeez. We're having
Jesus.
technical difficulties already here. Louise, jeez, get in there.
Yeah.
Even I know how to full screen. Okay.
Aren't you the technical guy? Aren't you? That's your
Okay, well, there you can see Garrett in
There
his
we
full
go.
screen.
There we go. G'day, Garrett. We're going to be talking about politics.
Yeah. Sometimes our guests are like, doesn't matter what's on in the background. I'm like, nah, but you really gave it away here, Garrett, in the background.
Well, it might be a particular brand.
Politics isn't the topic.
Yeah, it's not the topic of politics, but it's in the world of politics.
Gerrymandering. All right.
Wow,
Okay.
that's a pretty. I mean, we're not doing that, but I don't know why you would even say gerrymandering. I was like, but that's a deep cut. But
Okay. So
there's a lot of clues behind him
So
right now.
Garrett, have you written books on Nixon?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, did you sell them at a reasonable price, or are you a crook? Hey, that was a Nixon deep dive. Hey, here we go. Okay, Goldwater. Now I don't know what that is. Should I know what Goldwater is?
You should for this episode, yeah.
Fuck, I don't know what that is.
But that's a clue. That's a clue. Like you have Nixon and Goldwater.
And
2
Hamilton.
huge clues. Not as much as a clue.
Hamilton's not helping you at all. Nixon and Goldwater will help you with what
Okay,
specifically.
so we're going to talk about Watergate.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
The Watergate scandal. All right, let me introduce Garrett M. Graff. He is
I
a
don't
distinguished
know a lot about this.
journalist and best-selling historian, the former editor of Politico magazine, and a current contributor to Wired and CNN. Graff is the author of multiple books, including The Threat Matrix, Inside Robert Mueller's FBI, the national bestseller Raven Rock, about the government's Cold War doomsday plans, and the #1 national bestseller, The Only Plane in the Sky, an oral history of 9/11, compiling the voices of 500 Americans as they experienced that tragic day, which was named the industry's 2020 audio book of the year. He is also the host of Long Shadow, an 8-episode podcast series about the lingering questions of 9/11, and the executive producer of While the Rest of Us Die, a Vice TV series based on his book Raven Rock. His most recent book, Watergate, A New History, was published last month, became an instant bestseller on the New York Times list. You can go to garrettgraff.com and see all of his books and podcast links. Everything's on there. And thanks for being on the show, Garrett.
Yeah, I'm not going to do well here.
I thought you watch all the CNN history.
I watched the CNN thing, and I've seen the Nixon interviews. The
Have you
Frost
seen
Nixon.
All President's Men?
I haven't seen all the presidents,
Oh, you
man.
gotta
I
see
saw
that
some
movie.
of them.
How did you get, did you study politics in college and got into this, Garrett?
Studied journalism and then have spent most of my career covering politics and national security. And Watergate is, of course, one of the great stories of politics and national security.
So you're an actual journalist. You don't just put up what's the 10 hottest stars of the time or see how this person got fat, clickbait stuff. because I'm a bit mean about journalists now because I think that they've lost a lot of credibility over the years because of the internet and how the articles are written and stuff like that. But it's like saying all restaurants are McDonald's.
Yeah.
You know, there are different ones. So you're an actual journalist, Garrett, who does deep dive stuff.
Although you were number one on my list of the 10 hottest celebrities that
Really?
I'm being interviewed by.
Oh, he's good at these lists.
I thought you've been interviewed by. Yes, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I just reading some of your, I would like to read this oral history of 9/11. That looks really good. And I mean, obviously the Watergate book is the new one. So check all that stuff out. But I just reading your bio when you sent it to me, I was like, this all look really cool. So, okay. I'm going to ask Jim a series of questions about the Watergate scandal. And you're going to listen along while we're doing that, Garrett. And at the end of it, you're going to grade them 0 through 10, 10 being the best on accuracy. Kelly's going to grade them on confidence. I'm going to grade them on et cetera. 0 through 10, Pizzagate. We're going to combine them all together. 11 through 20, Sandpapergate. You know what that is?
I don't know what that is. No.
21 through 30, Nipplegate.
Don't know what that is.
That was the Janet Jackson.
Was that Nipplegate?
Yeah.
I know Americans like to slap the word gate on the end of things.
A lot of gates.
A lot of gates.
No, but Sandpapergate is an Australian.
Oh, that's when they scuffed up the ball.
Yeah, in cricket.
In cricket. Yeah, the ball tampering.
Against South Africa, I think.
Yeah, but fuck South Africa.
There was a lot of other ones like Sandwichgate, Fartgate, Penisgate, Stickygate. There's a lot of gates. But okay, let's start. What was the Watergate scandal? Like, what happened?
Okay, so the Watergate is named after the hotel that it happened in. And I believe, now I might be completely wrong here, I believe that Nixon ordered to have the Democratic Party, what's that thing where you put bugged? And so he could, wiretap, all that type of things. And he sent some people in there. And maybe when they actually got caught, he sent some people in there to destroy the evidence was when they actually got caught.
When did it happen? Do you know?
Oh, during Nixon's administration.
Like just a year. You don't have to do exact date. We'll get the exact date.
No, hang on. I'll get this. 1973.
Close. Why was it called Watergate? You said because it was
the name of the hotel, Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C.
Okay. What was the biggest part of the scandal that people don't know about?
What's the biggest thing? Why would I know about it? You just said what's the biggest thing that no one knows? And I say I know very little about the things that everyone knows about.
Did you ask this question in, Garrett? Is that one of your questions?
Asking me something. Okay, so the biggest.
Garrett added this in, yeah. If you don't know, I'm sure Garrett will enlighten us.
One of the microphone bugs was inside Marilyn Monroe.
Oh.
The corpse.
Right. Do you know who G. Gordon Liddy is? Sound familiar?
It does sound familiar. His name's actually Gordon Liddy, but he's really tall, so people used to say, "Gee, Gordon Liddy" to him.
So I'm assuming you're not going to know who John Mitchell is or Howard Hunt.
I don't know.
James McGuire.
I don't know. I'll learn with the rest of you.
How many times did they break in? It's the Democratic National Committee headquarters. Right. How many times did they break in there? How many break-ins were there?
Well, there had to be one break-in to bug the place and one break-in to remove the bug. So I'm going to say twice.
Okay, so they went back a second time to remove them.
Yeah.
Okay. How did the burglars...
Or to remove files or something. They were removing something.
How did the burglars get caught the second time then?
They left their key in the room. They had to go back down to reception. Yeah. That's because what they did was they put their key next to their phone. And that'll wipe those puppies.
In the 70s, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was new technology.
The police officers that responded to the scene were dressed a certain...
Oh, I know how it happened. Forrest Gump recorded them from over another building. It was keeping them awake with their flashlights.
Yeah, he called it in. The police officers that responded to the scene were dressed...
How is that the only thing I know about Watergate? Is that Forrest Gump that referenced it?
I got to be honest. I was like reading when I was doing this doc and stuff. I was reading and I didn't really... you think you know it because it's such a... it's like in the zeitgeist.
It's one of those things that I'm sure that you would have got taught it somewhat in the history classes.
I didn't get taught most of this stuff, like the details.
But I got told none of this, and we didn't have it on documentaries on Australian TV where we harped on about Watergate. All I know is like Nixon going, I'm not a crook. And then when he gets on the helicopter to go away and he does the two peace signs and all that type of stuff and all that crap.
Okay, so the police officers that responded to the scene were dressed in a certain way. What was it?
Sexy police officers. They were moonlighting as strippers.
Okay.
They knocked on the door. I hear somebody bug this office.
Everyone's in fuzzy cuffs.
What were some of the items that the apprehended men had on them?
There'll be a tape recorder. There would have been documents. There would have been, one of them had a packet of Wrigley gum.
What flavor?
Just the normal mint.
Okay.
No, these are serious guys. There's no fucking juicy fruit happening.
Not cinnamon gum.
I don't even know if juicy fruit was happening yet. I feel like it must have been.
They had the digital keys, but no juicy fruit.
Yeah.
Okay. How did the White House initially try to cover up any connection to them and the burglars?
Lie, deny. Just keep on saying you didn't do it.
Okay, but nothing specific. Or...
Shaggy, it wasn't me.
Okay, it wasn't me. That's what that song's about. I see you in the bedroom window. What does the White House plumbers refer to? Quote, the White House plumbers.
The White House would have been the people who put the bugs in there because they might have put it under sinks and stuff like that. And maybe that was the code word for the dodgy guys who did it.
Okay. What role did Martha Mitchell play in Watergate? And I said John Mitchell before, so that I can tell you that. I believe that's his wife, right? I'll give that away to
you. She might have been the whistleblower in the whole situation.
Okay. Who are Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein? Oh, you know what? Goldwater doesn't even. I gave you a wrong clue. I was thinking it was one of these guys, and it's the wrong word. Wrong name. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. Who were they?
They were the investigative journalists that uncovered Watergate.
And what does Deep Throat refer to?
Deep Throat was a movie in the 70s.
That's something different.
where the whole idea was that she had a clitoris at the back of her throat, and the only way she could come was by deep throating. I know everything about that movie.
No, this is something different.
Oh, that's why it's called that?
This is something different.
Linda Lovelace.
I have always wondered why it was called that.
I don't know why it's called Deep Throat either, but I always made me think of pornography. So, all right. How are the connections made between men arrested and President Nixon and others? Like, how do they finally connect them?
I think there would have been a paper trail. Also, Nixon stupidly. Oh, I know this one. Nixon not only bugged over there, but he bugged his entire office so that he would have a recording of everything that's said in the Oval Office. And they found those recordings and they found the actual conversations that he had.
Yeah. So the Watergate tapes. That's what and then there was one called the Smoking Gun tape. Do you know what was on that one and why it was called the Smoking Gun tape?
I'm not sure. The Smoking Gun. Oh, it was originally an episode of Bonanza, and then he taped over it.
It's like, who taped over my episode?
Yeah.
It's my favorite one.
So I was like, why'd you tape over that?
What was the Saturday Night Massacre in relation to Watergate?
That would have been not an actual massacre where people died, but that would have been where everyone was getting fired and people were being let out of their offices and put into cuffs or whatever. When all the arrests or accusations were made that night.
Okay, a couple more questions there. How many government officials were charged in relation to Watergate scandal? How many were convicted, and like how much time did they spend in prison? So how many were charged? How many were convicted?
15 charged, 2 convicted, 2 went to prison. I know that Nixon. He never got charged because Ford came in afterwards and he pardoned Nixon because he believed that the country had to move on. And a lot of people say that was a bad thing he did, but in hindsight, the trial would have gone on for years and years and years, and that's all that would have happened in sort of Ford's administration is hearing about the Nixon trial.
So yeah, that was my last question. What happened to Nixon? Was he pardoned? The answer to that. When did he resign? So what year? You said this happened in 73. When was his resignation?
74.
Okay. All right. Garrett Graff, how did Jim do? 0 through 10. 10's the best on his knowledge of the Watergate scandal.
I give him a 6.5.
Right.
It was actually a relatively strong performance. He gets partial credit for many of the answers. And in fact is much closer with his detailed knowledge of Deep Throat, the porn movie, than he probably realized.
Have you seen that movie, Garrett? It's not good. How did that become the biggest hit in the porn industry? And Linda Lovelace, she's all right.
It was the direct reason that Deep Throat the Source ended up getting the name Deep Throat the Source.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I thought that was not connected. That's the real. Oh,
it's a real thing. Deep Throat, the movie, was out in theaters at the time, and the idea of the source who liked to use his mouth was how they got Deep Throat.
They were going to call the source Titty Fuck 4. There was a big debate because that was the other popular movie at the time.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was a little long. Wow, it was in theaters too. Nice. All right, but
it was in the porn theaters. It wasn't in regular theaters.
Still, I was making fun of you. I didn't think that was right. You got points there. All right, how do you do on confidence, Kelly?
Honestly, his confidence score is low. It's a 3, but you impressed me, Jim. You did a lot better than I was expecting.
Damn.
I mean, well, at least I don't actually know if any of your answers are true because I don't know anything about this, but they sounded good, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, so we got up to 9.5 or 10.5. I'm going to give Jim 5 minutes setter just so you're in the sandpaper gate because, South Africa, Australia. Okay, so what was Watergate scandal? What happened? Jim said it was named after the hotel it happened in. Nixon ordered the Democratic Party wiretapped. Can you just talk, I guess, a general description of the Watergate scandal before we get into the details?
Yeah, so this was really the purpose of trying to write this book in the first place, was that America misunderstands what Watergate really was, and that we have this idea that it was this burglary on June 17th, 1972.
So close.
When Nixon's men, although it's worth saying that there's actually no proof that Nixon ordered the burglary himself, that these 5 burglars were arrested in the Democratic National Committee officers at the Watergate condo complex in Washington, D.C. But the reality of the Watergate scandal is actually much larger and weirder and zanier than people really remember. And part of what I was trying to do in this book is trace the Watergate as a mindset and less as an event. And it was this dark, paranoid, conspiratorial mindset that Nixon brought to the White House beginning in 1968, and Watergate itself, by the time he resigns in 1974, which Jim got right, Watergate was really a dozen different interrelated but distinct scandals, some of which on their own would have actually been among the largest political scandals in modern American political history, including the resignation of his vice president, Spiro Agnew, who was taking bribes inside the White House as part of a construction kickback scheme that he had been a part of earlier. And then there were a bunch of other sort of very weird plots that were part of this, including some of the only only credible treason allegations against a modern political figure in American history, when Nixon in 1968 began actually an attempt to stall the peace talks of the Vietnam War and keep the Vietnam War going in order to help him win the presidency in the fall of 1968.
Right.
And it's that scandal that Nixon knew about and that Lyndon Johnson knew about that really in many ways drives Nixon sort of ever more crazy and ever more paranoid over the course of the rest of his presidency as he tries to cover up that original sin.
Oh, so Nixon was already into just his first year of his second term, was he?
Yes. So the Watergate burglary happened in the summer of the re-election campaign, and the scandal really only bursts into public view right after his inauguration in the second term in January 1973.
So it worked. Arguably,
exactly.
It worked.
Yeah, because I didn't realize that it was after. Because I remember the one thing I always remember them people saying is like he didn't need to do this. He was going to win the election anyways, but he did win the election, so he clearly was going to probably win it anyways because he was already mired in the scandal and still got reelected.
No.
Yes, and that was exactly it. He was already on his way to a runaway victory in 72 when this burglary happened, but it didn't really break into the ranks of his administration until after the election itself, which 72 election, largest landslide in American political history. And, just 18 months later, Richard Nixon driven from office and impeached.
Now, if coming from another country and just watching movies, Nixon's always depicted as this sort of shonky, sort of car salesman-like guy who was just corruption on top of corruption. Were there good things he did? Like, he seemed to be pretty popular, because it seems like he's just marred because of the Watergate scandal. But before that, he seems like he was quite liked. If so, why?
Yeah, and this is actually one of the great tragic aspects of this entire scandal, is that Nixon, by almost any stretch or measurement, would be seen as one of the great presidents in the 20th century in the United States. He helped usher in the era of détente in the arms race in the Cold War, reopened diplomatic relations with China. He was the first president to visit Moscow, the first president to visit Peking, first president to visit a communist country.
Environmental too. He started the EPA,
He started
right?
the Environmental Protection Agency. He started the OSHA, the sort of workplace protection agency.
Clean Water Act, I think, too. Clean Water Act, because I used to be a biologist, so I know. I remember reading that. I'm like, wow, Nixon started all these organizations.
How was he on civil rights? Was he pretty good on that?
So what's interesting about Nixon in the arc of the way that the 20th century unfolds is he is really the hinge upon which the 20th century turns. And you sort of see the end of the New Deal and the Great Society, the sort of liberal consensus of the FDR and LBJ years give way to Nixon and what was then called the Southern strategy, to appeal to basically white voters in the South on behalf of the Republican Party, and ushers in Richard Nixon ushers in this era of a much more racialized, polarized, nativist politics that unfolds through the Reagan years, and then, in many ways finds its natural conclusion with the election of Donald Trump in 2016.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And he met Elvis.
And he met Elvis, the most requested photo in the history of the National Archives.
Yeah, that's what they were. The picture of him with Elvis. Yeah,
that's right. War on Drugs. He started the War on Drugs.
Yeah, and he was played by Kevin Spacey, so that's good. That's good for his look.
He's been played by so many people, though.
Kevin Spacey did a good job. You can tell you what, he's a good actor, man. What's his name? Michael Sheen, not Michael Sheen. Who's Michael Sheen?
Michael Sheen. Yeah.
Michael Sheen played Elvis. I didn't buy him as Elvis. I think he's a fine actor, but I don't remember Elvis being scary looking.
At that point in his life, maybe. Why was it called Watergate? We went over that. What was the biggest part of the scandal that people don't know about? And then Jim said one of the microphone bugs was inside of Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, it was planted there to hear on Kennedy back in the day. He shoved it up her so that when he was with Kennedy, you could win that election. But then the famous sweat on the lip, right? That's he had a sweaty lip, and that was the first televised debate. And America went like this. They went, I just can't trust this cunt. He's got a sweaty lip.
They were right.
Yeah, and then you have Donald Trump just going and just talking about grabbing pussies, and we're like, that's the man.
No sweaty lip.
Yeah.
So you definitely get confidence points for the Marilyn Monroe bug. That I will say, history has not yet shown much truth to the rumor of a bug buried in Marilyn Monroe. But,
only a few inches deep.
Waiting on the documentation.
Didn't go too far.
So what was the biggest part of the scandal that people don't know about?
So this is the weirdness of this Chenault affair, which I mentioned before, which is this effort in the 1968 presidential race where Nixon, working with the South Vietnamese, tries to stall the Paris peace talks. And leads to when the release of the Pentagon Papers comes out in 1971, which were these documents that showed how the American people had been lied to by the Johnson administration and the Kennedy administration about the truth of the Vietnam War, that sort of the administrations knew that America was losing and kept sending men over there to die. Nixon becomes afraid that this Chennault affair, named after this woman, Anna Chennault, that was a sort of go-between between Nixon's campaign manager, John Mitchell, and the South Vietnamese government, was going to come out. And so this is where Nixon actually orders the only burglary that we know that Nixon actually ordered, which is not the Watergate burglary, but an attempt to burglarize the Brookings Institution, which is the think tank in Washington that they imagine incorrectly it has this secret file on the Nixon's campaign shenanigans and betrayals in 1968. And so the Nixon White House cooks up this crazy scheme where they want to firebomb the Brookings Institution and then hire this group of Cuban burglars, the same people who go on to become the burglars at the Watergate complex the year later, and dress them up as firefighters and buy them a used fire truck that they would respond dressed as firefighters to the burning Brookings building, break in, steal the papers from the Brookings Institution, and escape amid the chaos of the fire.
Wait a minute. Wait, is that? I can see some holes in this plan.
A lot of holes.
Yeah. So what happens when the real firemen show up? They're not gonna show up and go, oh, there's another truck already here.
Whose old ass truck is this?
Yeah, they're like
from Station 12.
Yeah. What's this truck with a pump hose doing here?
Why does it say Warner Brothers Prop Department?
That's exactly that was exactly their plan, was that there would be so many fire trucks that no one would notice an additional one. But then the burglary falls apart, not because it is one of the craziest, most criminal schemes anyone could have possibly imagined, but because the White House turns out to be too cheap to buy the fire truck. And
they show up in a Honda Accord.
The bus.
Dressed as clowns.
Yeah, I also like that they're there to steal paper, because that is a good ruse, because you walk out of a fire holding a whole wad of paper and you go, I got this out of here. This stuff goes right up if a flame even gets near it.
We're saving lives here.
Yeah.
It'd be funny if they got the truck and it just said Nixon firefighters. So like, nothing to say here.
I'm going to go back in there and get a hay bale next.
Top secret. You know what's interesting about this podcast is you said the Pentagon Papers, and we did an episode on the Vietnam War, but eventually I'll learn everything because I'd forgotten exactly what the Pentagon Papers were. We talked about in the episode.
Eventually I'll learn everything.
Well, no, because I don't remember.
What if I can say? Eventually I'll know everything.
No, I mean it'll get hammered in my head enough. I still didn't remember what the Pentagon Papers, and now this is the second time, and maybe I'll retain the information. That's what I was saying. But
you're only like 8 podcasts away from knowing everything.
I know. Yeah. We got to do something on the Pentagon next.
So Nixon wanted the Vietnam War to extend so that he would get voted back in. Wouldn't he want it like the war's over and everyone would rejoice him? Or is it the old idea that you don't get rid of a president during wartime?
No, so this was 1968 when Nixon was running for the first time.
He wanted in.
He wanted the war to keep going.
So that he could be the solution.
Right.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay.
Not a really crafty fucker, that Nixon.
Yeah.
Let's just take a break and do some ads. And we're back.
So I asked you, G. Gordon Liddy was, John Mitchell, E. Howard Hunt. I mean, I just wrote these names down as players in Watergate. I mean, how important or not important? I mean, maybe you can talk about those names.
Yeah. So, and I'll answer one of the later questions that you touch on too. Sure. Is that in the Pentagon Papers are this signal event for the Nixon administration, where they wildly overreact, plot this Brookings bombing, even though the Pentagon Papers really have nothing to do with the Nixon administration. There are 2 million words, none of them being Richard Nixon, in the Pentagon Papers. Instead, what they do is they create this team inside the White House to fight other leaks of national security. And they bring in Howard Hunt, this retired CIA officer turned espionage novelist, And G. Gordon Liddy, this wacky, rambunctious former FBI agent who neither of these men who should have had anything close to anything to do with the presidency and the White House, and they create this unit that is known eventually by the name of the White House Plumbers. And the Plumbers is a reference to their job to stop leaks.
Right.
And that they end up in this very weird and bizarre, ever more bizarre cascading series of events. And then are put in charge, and then sort of after having failed miserably at their attempts to stop leaks, they are put in charge of the dirty tricks for the 72 reelection campaign. And G. Gordon Liddy comes up with this incredible plan known as Operation Gemstone, which was his campaign of dirty tricks that he had the CIA draw up the charts for, and then went to present to John Mitchell, who was simultaneously the campaign manager and the U.S. Attorney General, the man, obviously, the head law enforcement official for the United States. And G. Gordon Liddy lays out this Operation Gemstone, which is this crazy series of plans. It is kidnapping anti-war activists, drugging them and taking them to Mexico, and where they would be held hostage during the conventions. It is recruiting a team of prostitutes who would lure Democratic officials to a houseboat in the Miami harbor that had been rigged for sound and photographs. It's a spy plane that would follow the Democratic campaign planes around to harass them and surveil them as they travel around on the campaign plane. And at the end of this presentation in the office of the Attorney General, John Mitchell, again, Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the United States, doesn't say to Gordon Liddy, this is a awful criminal conspiracy that should have nothing to do with the president of the United States, and I'm going to have the FBI arrest you as you leave my office. He instead says, why don't you come back in a couple weeks with something that's about half this budget, and we'll talk about it again.
Always budget, huh? It's always a budget thing. Like we want to do these crazy things.
Yeah, like I can make that budget small.
Yeah.
Just bug a hotel room. Why do the prostitutes have to be on a yacht?
Yeah.
Like just
out there.
Put a tent in someone's backyard. Like you don't have to put in that much fucking effort.
The prostitute tent.
Yeah, what's this prostitute boat? That's why when I see prostitutes, I never say anything. I tell them I'm a mute. So that nothing's recorded. No one knows.
Yeah. And then also nowadays you don't even have to kidnap people to take them to Mexico to do drugs. You just tell them that they would get in there.
And who found these plumbers? I might have missed that in your answer. Because you said they were both retired FBI, CIA guys. How did they get recruited? Or did they just hatch this idea by themselves?
No, so they were brought into the White House. They were sort of known. G. Gordon Liddy was in the Nixon administration, working at the Treasury Department. Howard Hunt was working for a public relations firm in D.C. that was a CIA front, and had been recruited into the White House by Chuck Colson, who's another one of the Nixon counselors who ends up being sort of mixed up in this. And they are, shall we say, poorly supervised in their office roles. Yeah. And everything goes wild.
And they were also called the plumbers because they were old blokes and their ass cracks hanged out at the top of their pants. They were doing that thing where they were trying to hitch it back up.
That's how they were identified.
You know what I want to do an episode on? Fucking unders t-shirts, singlets or whatever. Who the fuck wears those?
The whole episode on that?
Ah, yeah, sure. You know those things, those white, like the wife beaters?
Just the tank top kind of
Who wears an undershirt?
I don't know.
What's all that about?
Do you have one on, Garrett?
I do, but, I'm a preppy.
Okay, I don't know the benefits of it because if it could stop the pits from staining, so sometimes I wear a t-shirt.
Yeah.
No, but just the one that goes over your shoulders.
You have a shirt or a tank top one?
Shirt.
Yeah, shirt's
shirt
all
wearer,
right.
yeah.
Shirt's all right.
Yeah.
Who wears the tank top one? What's the fucking this t-shirt stops
Sweaty
a bit
nipples.
of sweating, keeps you warm.
Chest sweat,
Does
I guess?
something.
I don't
No, it's a
know.
meshy material.
Yeah,
if that would cause
know.
nipple chafing more than anything.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
Mesh.
The t-shirt I get because if you want to, but yeah,
I got a friend who wears one. I'll ask him.
yeah,
Yeah,
get
yeah.
to the bottom of that.
All right, get him on as a specialist.
I wear them every now and then, but
You do?
yeah, every now and then.
Oh, he's
Why?
my friend, I guess.
Why you
You're
do
just
that?
wearing a baseball
It
jersey today.
compresses the man boobs a little bit sometimes.
Oh, just get lipo in your tits like everybody else.
Like everybody else. How many break-ins to the DNC headquarters were there? Jim said twice. And why did they go back a second time? And then how did they get caught? Yeah, so
Someone left
Yeah,
their
so-
keys.
yeah, Jim said the key. They go back to
So
reception.
Jim
Great
was
guess.
right in totality and wrong on the details, which was, and this is one of the things that most people actually don't know about the Watergate scandal, is that the time that they were arrested was actually the second burglary.
Yeah, I did not
and
know
they
that when I
had-
read this. I did not know that at all. Yeah.
They had been in a couple of weeks earlier to try to bug and wiretap the DNC offices and had screwed it up. And they were coming back that night on June 17th to try to fix the problems of the first burglary. And they were caught because they had taped the door, one of the stairwell doors open, and the tape was discovered by a security guard who called the police. And they were arrested by undercover police officers who responded. And because the police officers were undercover, they were in plain clothes. And so the lookout did not spot the police officers entering the building and give them time to actually evacuate from the DNC offices before they were found.
Now, so they went in, they bugged the place, and they didn't do it right, and then they had to come back again and fix their shonky job. It sounds like they're complete and utter morons, but in their defense, I'll watch Luis and Jack set up this podcast every week, and they're not hiding anything. The wires are all open, and it's very rare that it works. And that's with modern day technology. Where did they, because the recording equipment needed big reel to reel stuff. It wasn't digital or anything like that. Where did they hide the bugs? It's not like now where you have like a little thing you put on a hat or something. Like, where did they go?
So the bugs were actually supposed to broadcast wirelessly to the Howard Johnson Hotel across the street, where they had set up a lookout post and listening post that was manned by another former FBI agent there, who was the one who was the lookout who missed the plainclothes officers. Now, one of the sort of fun wrinkles of this is that there's actually some pretty credible evidence that the CIA knew of the burglary that night. That you had, as I mentioned, Howard Hunt, former CIA officer, James McCord, another one of the burglars, a former CIA officer.
Because they wanted to catch him? They wanted to catch him? Is that why they...
So this is where this is where it sort of gets interesting, is that one of the burglars, one of the Cuban burglars, the other five burglars were all Cuban Bay of Pigs veterans recruited from Miami to come up and be part of this burglary gang. And one of them was an active CIA asset. He was actually on the CIA payroll at the time and had been reporting all of his activities with Howard Hunt and G. Gordon Liddy to the CIA. And so there's some speculation that the CIA knew about the burglary and tried to sabotage it that night, and that they were involved in summoning the police that night to arrest the burglars and try to bring down the Nixon administration.
Now, I know you said that they were all Cubans and were from the Bay of Pigs. Why Cubans besides that? Like, couldn't you just gotten any old Joe to do it?
They used them in the other stuff, remember? The fire truck
Yeah,
thing.
so
I know, but why Cubans the whole time?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, so Howard Hunt, the sort of one of those White House plumbers, he had been involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion as a CIA officer, and so he'd sort of gotten to know all of these men through his previous work with the CIA, and knew them as dodgy characters. G. Gordon Liddy bragged to John Mitchell that sort of between all of the men he'd recruited, they'd killed something like 24 men.
Right, so they're just badasses is the answer. Yeah. But also when you show up to a fire and one of the firemen's come out smoking a cigar, you have to go, there's something going on here.
Those aren't legal here.
Got a thick accent.
Yeah, is that what they got him for, cigars? They locked him up.
Say hello to my little rat. Okay, not even a good cue. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. They got caught. The police officer responded to the scene. We discussed that. Oh, what were some of the items that the apprehended men had on them? Like, obviously, recorders, I guess, but what else?
It'd be cigars,
and
a really old car, a sandwich with ham in it.
A Cuban sandwich?
Yeah, that's all I know. It's big chunks of ham.
Yeah, it's a good sandwich.
All those type of things, yeah.
Well, this is what ends up really tipping off the police that this is a weird burglary, is all of the burglars were dressed in suits and they were carrying sequential $100 bills. Mm-hmm. And the arresting police officers said that they had never seen burglars who carried cash into a burglary before.
Right.
Why did they have cash?
Well, their working theory as burglars, was that if a security guard intercepted them, they would be able to bribe the security guard with the cash. The security guard, of course, never confronted them and just called the police directly.
He would have
so
been
that they never got the chance to do that.
Also, there's another theory that they were going to the strip club afterwards, because if you do a burglary or something, you don't go home. You go out afterwards and you go, we did it. You have that Ocean's 11 moment where you all look at the fountain.
Jazz plays.
So Forrest Gump was not involved in any way.
Yeah, Forrest Gump. Okay, was he real? Because he seems, or was he loosely based on someone?
He was less involved in the Watergate burglary than the movie makes him out to be.
Forrest Gump also Cuban. Did you know that?
Forrest Gump taught me everything I know about American history.
Well, you learn a little about Watergate. At least you know there's a break-in. They were busted.
I've seen the Frost versus Nixon interview movie. That was all right.
Let's see. How did the White House initially try to cover up any connection to them and the burglars? He said, lie, deny, Shaggy, it wasn't me.
Yeah, which is effectively true. And where they had tried to cover it up first was to, again, we come to the CIA. The Nixon White House went to the CIA and asked the agency to intervene with the FBI and tell them that it was a national security operation at the Watergate and that the FBI should drop their investigation. That didn't hold. FBI proceeds. The CIA wouldn't do that. And at that point, Nixon then just denies for 2 years until the Nixon tapes begin to come out. You get to that smoking gun tape that you referenced in a different question, where
we can jump ahead to that anytime you want.
Yeah, where you hear Richard Nixon actually basically order the cover up on the tapes and show that he was involved in the cover up much earlier than he had said that he was.
Why would he bloody tape his own office? It seems like I know that, we'll record meetings and then I can play them back and listen to them. It's the same reason I don't tape my stand-up anymore. I used to tape it all the time and I never listened to it. I never went home and listened to the set afterwards, so I stopped doing it. But I mean, so he would record meetings, but every now and again, we've all had a wank in our office. Everyone just in the middle of the day. Nixon just... I'm at Elvis. That's what he, like, you know what I mean?
Oval Office, you think you had one?
You're telling me that no president's ever had a wank in the Oval Office. The only thing that's happened is Monica Lewinsky had a cigar shoved up her. Is that all you're telling me?
There's so many windows and Secret Servicemen and stuff.
You pull the Secret Serviceman, that's the safest wank you're ever going to have. You tell the bloke at the door, don't come in.
Whatever you hear.
Don't come in for the next 2 minutes.
I'll do a quick one this time.
Yeah.
Whatever you hear going on in here, do not come. I'm fine.
Yeah.
All right.
People are allowed to come in and out. They're not allowed to come in and out.
Yeah, that's true.
See, this is okay. I'll talk about this. I always felt weird about, like, so when Matt Lauer went down, right, for what happened to him, right, and I'm not justifying.
The button under the desk.
The button under the desk.
Yeah.
The button under the desk that locks the door.
Yeah.
I was working the Jim Jeffries show at that stage, and I was like, fuck, I want a button under the desk. Not for anything dodgy.
You know what? Now that you say it, they made it sound like it was to lock people in the room, and maybe it was.
No,
I don't know.
no, it's
But
to
maybe
let people in, and then when they leave your office, you lock the door again.
Yeah, okay.
Otherwise, you're getting up and you're going back and you're getting up and you're going back. As soon as I heard that, I was sitting in my office, was on TV, and we were about to do a piece on it, and I was like, I'm not talking about that because I want a button under my desk.
It's just convenient.
It makes perfect sense. Come in. All right, goodbye. You lock the door again. It's not to keep people in. They can still go up and turn the fucking handle.
Well, back to your original question, why did Nixon tape himself? I think was what you asked, Garrett.
It's actually one of the weirder moments in this whole weird story, which is Richard Nixon knew at the start of his presidency he wanted nothing to do with taping systems in the Oval Office. The Kennedy administration, the Johnson administration had both taped themselves.
Yeah.
You may have actually heard at some point the tapes of the Cuban Missile Crisis as Kennedy deals with that. But what ends up happening with Nixon is, so he has that taping system torn out at the start of his presidency. And then as his presidency unfolds, Nixon actually thinks his presidency is going really well. And what he's afraid is that he's not going to get the credit for his own genius that he feels that he should be getting, and that he's got aides like Henry Kissinger out there who are taking credit for his successes and blaming him for the failures, and that he thinks these aides are being duplicitous and sort of saying one thing in the closed door of the Oval Office and then saying something else at the fancy Georgetown cocktail parties where they're hanging out with journalists. And so Nixon installs this secret taping system basically to secure his own place in history so that he can go back when he writes his memoirs and get the actual things that he said and sort of point out where other people failed him. But the big difference between Kennedy and Johnson is that they had a taping system that they could turn on and off.
Because Kennedy needed that. He needed that.
Yeah.
Kennedy needed to turn it off every now and again.
And Nixon installs something that is actually just voice activated. And so it runs for 2 years of Nixon's presidency with no one ever the wiser.
I would say things while I'm by myself to make me seem like I was a veteran president, right? So I'd act like there was someone in the room, and I'd be like, you know what I've just thought? How about, because this is the wheels were only put on suitcases in 1971 was the pattern, right? But if he got in earlier and then just log dated at 1970, if he went, you know what, Betsy, my assistant, I reckon there should be wheels and suitcases. And then I go, that's a good idea, Mr. Nixon. Like that. And then all of a sudden, I invented that, right? You can fucking do all that stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, we have no record of Betsy existing.
Also, all this talk of, we mentioned Bay of Pigs, and it's been rattling around in my brain the whole time. I got a great idea for a reality show. Like, Love Island, where it's all just hot people fucking each other. Right? Don't get ahead of yourselves. Don't get ahead of yourself.
I think I know where you're going.
But I have a show. It's called Bay of Pigs. It's just for ugly people.
Yeah. No, I got ahead of yourself. And
the log line is, they deserve love too.
Yeah.
That is a good slogan.
Well, you shouldn't.
And
It's not a bad idea. Like, me and Jack have pitched a lot of TV shows, got into a lot of meetings, right? And I tell you, Bay of Pigs is right
You're
up
going to
there.
have to change the name probably, though. I don't think people are going to want to be on a show called Pigs.
Yeah, we'll find a network.
No, we're not. Look, these people are really ugly. These people are very well aware.
Self-described pigs.
Yeah, they know they're pigs, right?
There's an all-you-can-eat buffet every episode.
We're going to expect half the contestants not to show up because they won't get off their couch. These people are fucking pigs. On Bay of Pigs, hosted by Jim Jeffries. And I'll gain weight. Just to do it so that they won't feel bad about how good looking I am.
You're on there too.
I'm going to be the best looking person on Bay of Pigs.
Okay.
You're going to clean up and you're the host.
Yeah, clean up. And now it's, you'll have different rounds called...
Courses.
Yeah, they'll eat out of a trough.
All right, let's get back to Watergate. So that's,
My
I think it's a good show. I think you should
my
pitch
mate
it.
used to have a friend. He started his friend, and his nickname's Trough, and they called him Trough the whole time because he only shagged ugly birds.
Oh, no.
So his name was Trough.
That's so bad.
That's a great Australian nickname.
Because he ate out of trough. But.
No, Trough, because yeah. Anyway.
I think that's interesting though, but because I always thought Nixon was the only one that recorded himself. So that makes more sense now when you refer back to that. Okay. What role did Martha Mitchell play in Watergate? And you said she might have been the whistleblower. So she was married to John Mitchell, the attorney general, right?
Yeah. So Martha Mitchell is effectively the first conservative pundit in American politics. She is the wife of John Mitchell, comes to Washington as the wife of the attorney general, and becomes this loud, brash, outspoken woman from Arkansas. She was known as the mouth of the South. And she becomes this national celebrity, speaking to Republicans, clubs and fundraisers all around the country.
She's like a Tommy Lauren type person, is she? Like,
yeah, exactly.
But not as good looking.
Well, she's Rush Limbaugh before Rush Limbaugh really arrives.
Yes.
And what she would do, she had a terrible alcohol problem. And she would spend her evening. Part of what makes this story so weird is there are all of these other chapters of the Watergate saga that actually take place at the Watergate condo complex. So the Mitchells live at the Watergate, and she would spend all evening eavesdropping on her husband's telephone calls on the extension in the other room. And then when John Mitchell would go to bed, she would be several drinks in, and she would start, phone banking reporters at like midnight, 2 a.m. to dish on all of the gossip that she had learned in the Nixon administration. So she becomes this key source of gossip and rumors and controversial hot takes of the day. And then she actually, in some ways, does become one of the initial whistleblowers.
But not on purpose. She thought
not on purpose. Yeah. So she is her husband. The Mitchells are in California the night of the Watergate burglary. John Mitchell flees back to Washington to deal with the burglary, leaves her there under guard because she will immediately recognize that one of the burglars who's been arrested is her former bodyguard. And so she will know that these burglars are tied to the Nixon administration.
Right.
And she eventually finds a newspaper, reads about the burglary, tries to call a reporter to tell them that this is all a massive cover-up. And the guard that was left with Richard Nixon, the guard that Mitchell had left with Martha, wrestles her away from the phone, tears the phone from the wall, and pins her down to the ground and injects her with tranquilizers to knock her out.
My God.
Oh, God. She was already half drunk anyway.
Yeah.
That's why it's called Martha's Vineyard. She had all of it.
And the Mitchells' marriage sort of understandably unwinds pretty quickly from there on out. They end up separating and divorcing as John Mitchell is arrested and indicted for his role in the Watergate cover-up. And it becomes this like very dark and tragic story buried in the larger Watergate saga.
Did she ever sober up? And if so, did she have to ironically go to the Betty Ford Clinic?
No, she actually quite the opposite.
It's probably
she
not
actually,
how ironic should be.
Never. Her health deteriorates very quickly, and she died sort of shortly after Nixon resigns. And she and John Mitchell never speak again after he walks out of their. After she walks out of after he walks out of their Park Avenue apartment when they separate, and then. But there's a big Sean Penn movie about Martha Mitchell coming, I think, next month. So we will all learn a lot more about her pretty soon.
I thought it was the sequel to Milk.
Yeah.
And cookies.
The sequel's called And Cookies.
Okay. Who?
Just based on Magic Johnson's wife and the one time she went to San Francisco and saw where he died.
Who are Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein? Jim said investigative journalist that uncovered it, and then Deep Throat said referred to the movie, which I did not know. So maybe we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is where Jim was right on. That the Woodward and Bernstein, two of the investigative reporters assigned by the Washington Post to the story, they become famous in the movie All the President's Men with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. That becomes the iconic pop culture take on Watergate itself. And one of the things that I sort of try to trace out in the book is that Woodward and Bernstein matter, but not quite in the way that they are portrayed in the movie. That they are sort of less central to the overall tale than history has held. Woodward has this very famous source known as Deep Throat, named after the movie, as we discussed, and played by Hal Holbrook in the Redford Hoffman movie. And for 40 years, no one knew who that was, who Deep Throat actually was. And the idea was that this was, some crusading, good government, pro-democracy guy out to stop Nixon and his corrupt administration. And what we've actually learned just in the last 15 years is that it was Mark Felt, who was the deputy director of the FBI, and was not out to sink Nixon or save American democracy. He was engaged in a bunch of bureaucratic knife fighting in the FBI itself, and was trying to sink the director of the FBI so that Mark Felt, Deep Throat, could take over the FBI himself.
You selfish bastard, Deep Throat.
Yeah.
There's so many players with different motives.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
I didn't know it was as complex as it was. There seems to be so many different.
I got to read this book. This sounds awesome.
Yeah. It's that's when I was like getting the question, I was like, wow, I don't know anything about this, even though you think you do growing up in America, because you hear Watergate's going on, but you don't know anything about it. Yeah.
Was there must have been, this seems ripe for, ripe for, what's the conspiracy theories, right? And
Yes.
so we know now with the internet, like if they had the internet back then, this would have all been QAnon shit and the Democrats did it and they put the bugs in themselves. Was there a load of conspiracy theories just amongst the media and the public when it happened?
Yeah, so lots of conspiracy theories then, lots of conspiracy theories now. There was a big book that came out in the early 1990s, actually, that said that one of the motives for the Watergate burglary was a CIA-sponsored call girl ring that was operating in Washington at the time. That they were that the burglars were trying to find evidence of that ring, or find whether the Democrats knew of that ring of call girls, and that book provoked years of libel lawsuits and defamation lawsuits among the key players of the Watergate scandal as that all has unfolded. And the truth of the matter is, here we are 50 years later, we're never going to know the truth of who ordered the Watergate burglary and why.
Well, what do you think? This is what I suspect, just from this brief conversation, but I suspect that maybe Nixon didn't know directly, but he told some people, just get it done. To do what you have to do would have been the order. You know what I mean? But I think he would have distanced himself from the nitty gritty and the finer details, so he'd have plausible deniability. But do you think that Nixon just actually said in words, you go do this, you go do this, you go do this, or do you think he didn't know?
No, so I don't think actually Nixon knew at all. And in fact, the burglary seems so poorly planned and so bungled at every stage that it actually seems most likely that it was not approved at any high level in the administration at all.
So why couldn't Nixon just go, fire these people? I'm so sorry to the public. I knew nothing about this. He might have lost a lot of respect, but he may have still kept his job.
It was the tape, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of reason to believe that that might have been possible relatively early on. What Nixon was afraid, though, was that this group of people had been involved in all of these other criminal schemes, and that basically, like, when you start pulling on this one burglary thread, it will lead you all the way back through all of these other, the Brookings firebomb plot, the burglary, the previous fall that we haven't discussed, of the psychiatrist's office of the Pentagon Papers leaker, Daniel Ellsberg, which was another one of these plots carried out by the plumbers. And then all the way back eventually to that Chenault affair. And Nixon basically probably had nothing to do with the Watergate burglary itself, but he was engaged in so many other crimes and abuses of power by then that he was terrified that sort of anyone who turned over this rock about the burglary would stumble into these other crimes.
Yeah. And then he got caught saying, but I guess I always thought he got caught talking about the burglary, but it was more about covering it up. So that,
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So the Saturday Night Massacre, let's talk about that. And then, like, how many people were charged, convicted, in prison, like that, like kind of the wrap up of the whole scandal.
Yeah. So, and this is where you get, most people just don't understand the full scope and scale of this, is that it ends up being 69 people are indicted and charged amid Watergate. And most of them convicted. Many of them actually head to prison. John Mitchell ends up being the highest ranking official in U.S. government ever to be sentenced to prison. 2 cabinet officials go on trial at one point. And even actually New York Yankees owner George Steinbrenner ends up being charged and convicted in Watergate amid some of the illegal campaign finance donations that were being funneled as part of the dirty tricks efforts. American Airlines pleads guilty to criminal charges. Goodyear Tire, all manner of.
What did the tire company get up to?
I don't know.
They must have been contributing money, were they?
Exactly. And there's sort of all of these other, as I said, sub scandals and related scandals that unfold through all of this.
And so what, the massacre was the arresting of all these people in the one night?
No, the massacre, you had it right originally, which was the firing in October of 1973 of the leadership of the Justice Department as Nixon tried to stop those tapes from becoming public. And
that's
he
what I said.
ends up,
You did pretty good. Well, sort of. Yeah, he's giving you credit, but you said, yeah, he was pretty good. So then Nixon, of course, he was forced to resign. He was never impeached, right? He was forced to resign.
He was impeached, but they never, the impeachment never went away.
There were articles of impeachment that were passed in the House at the committee level, never actually passed the full House because Nixon resigned before he was actually formally impeached.
Yeah, he wasn't probably. No one ever gets bullied.
Ford pardon.
That's one of the things that used to bug me on the Jim Jeffries shows. And they're talking about Trump, and then we'd have writers in the room go, "Well, he needs to be impeached." Impeachment's a lot of bullshit. Nothing ever happens. It's a lot of who. Like so Clinton gets impeached, Trump gets impeached, and they were still there.
Yeah, peachy. And then Ford pardons him.
Exactly. So Ford pardons him in the fall of 1974, right after Nixon resigns for exactly the reason that you guys discussed, which is that he feels that he sort of will never going to be able to get on with his presidency if the country is captivated and distracted by the trial of the former president.
Yeah.
Like, why would, because I saw, it was one of those CNN documentaries, the 60s, the 70s, that type of stuff. I saw one of those ones. And that's where I learned that. Why would the trial have to go on for a year or 2 years or something like that? Why couldn't they just I never understand this. Just get onto it. Do it tomorrow. Am I a moron?
Yeah. So Nixon was probably on a path to be indicted and charged in the fall of 1974. That it would have, as you said, probably taken about a year to bring that case to trial with all of the evidence and witnesses that were necessary. And then, that would have been, pretty close to the 76 election at that point.
When
and Ford wanted time.
When he resigned, what was the public opinion of him? Was he still popular? Were there still Nixon apologists? Or was he just like everyone was like, oh, we've been gypped? Can't use that term anymore.
His support evaporated pretty quickly, and actually the Goldwater that you had thought you were wrong about here behind me is actually related. And Barry Goldwater, the 1964 Republican presidential nominee, very respected senator at that point on Capitol Hill, goes down to the White House in early August 1974 and says to Nixon basically, like, you've lost all of your support if you don't resign now. You will be impeached and you will be convicted and removed from office by the Senate.
Oh, yeah. Goldwater. Is that? I never even
Barry
heard.
Goldwater. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew. I thought it was one of the reporters.
His family's original name was Piss.
Yeah. Okay.
Classed it up.
They changed it. My name's Gary Piss. I'll never get voted in.
Goldwater. Okay, here's a part of the show called Dinner Party Facts. We ask our expert guests to give us a fact that's obscure, interesting, that if this topic comes up at a dinner party, they can lay some knowledge on some people. So what do you think?
So I think one of the really fun facts in this is that Deep Throat actually didn't start out leaking to Bob Woodward. I mean, this is sort of the classic, most famous source in all of American history. But Deep Throat, Mark Felt, actually starts leaking to the Washington Post's crosstown rival, the Washington Daily News, in early July 1972, 2 weeks after the burglary. The Washington Daily News ceases publication and goes out of business. And he goes across town and starts leaking to Bob Woodward in August.
I was about to say that. I've only ever heard of the Washington Post, or New York Times, but I've never heard of the Washington Daily News.
So Woodward's very famous from this, obviously. So it's all because they went out of business, the other paper.
Yep.
How much credit do Bob Woodward and Bernstein get with uncovering Watergate versus how much government officials were uncovering stuff?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and this was one of the things that surprised me in my research was the popular history version of this is that Woodward and Bernstein basically like drive the story straight through to Nixon's resignation. And there's actually a pretty narrow window where Woodward and Bernstein matter in the first couple of months of the scandal, and they matter in a slightly different way than is widely understood. And that there's actually this constellation of about a half dozen reporters who from the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, who all really deserve credit for helping to keep the Watergate story alive long enough to let Congress start investigating and break the logjam of the FBI investigation.
Well, I tell you what, I've learned a lot on this podcast. I would have originally, if you said Woodward and Bernstein, I would have gone, they wrote a few musicals.
Yeah.
That sounds like Woodward and Bernstein or their law firm that they fucking did something. I also learned I'll never trust a woman who says she can deep throat. They're untrusty sneaks, those bastards. I'll tell everyone.
Garrett Graff, thank you for being here again. The website is garrettgraff.com. The book is Watergate, A New History. Go buy that book if you want to learn more about Watergate. He has a bunch
of why don't you make sure you spell his name too?
Okay, yeah, garrettgraff.com, GarrettGraff. So 2 T's, 2 F's.com. All the links to his books are on there. Watergate, A New History. Also the book on Robert Mueller. The 9/11 oral history book, The Only Plane in the Sky, an oral history of 9/11. Links to your podcast, The Long Shadow, an 8-episode podcast. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Obviously, Garrett knows a lot about what he's talking about and really interesting. And thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for being on the podcast, brother. I appreciate it, man.
This was really fun, guys. Thanks.
All right. If you're ever at a party and someone comes up to you and says, you want to hear this musical by Woodward and Bernstein? You go, I don't know about that. And then go off into a cupboard and deep throat someone. Good night, Australia.